She placed the envelope on the reception desk at 1147 p.m. $50,000. Cash. She did not leave a name. She did not wait for anyone to see her. She straightened the edges of the envelope against the marble, turned and walked back toward the service corridor. Her uniform still smelled like floor cleaner and the dust behind the vents on the 8th floor. He had been watching from the mezzanine for 11 minutes. He had seen her open the envelope. He had seen her count it. He had seen her hands stop moving. He had seen her fold it closed and carry it downstairs like it weighed nothing. Tonight, he followed her. Lennox Ashford did not go home. He stepped into the back seat of the black sedan idling on Montgomery Street and said 5 words to his driver. "Follow that woman. Keep distance." The driver did not ask which woman. He had worked for Lennox for 9 years. He knew which tone meant a question was not welcome. The sedan pulled away from the curb and turned south on Battery. Lennox watched her through the windshield. She walked with purpose. Not fast, not slow. The pace of someone who had a schedule that did not allow for variation. She crossed Market Street without waiting for the signal. She knew the timing of the lights. She had walked this route before. Many times. He told himself he was being practical. That a person who returns $50,000 is either honest or performing honesty, and both were worth understanding. He had built a logistics empire on the principle that every action has a motive and every motive can be measured. Generosity without explanation made him uneasy. It was a variable his system had no column for. The architecture changed first. Glass and steel gave way to older facades. Painted brick, iron fire escapes. Then the storefronts shifted. A check-cashing place with a neon sign missing 2 letters. A laundromat still open at midnight, blue light spilling across the sidewalk. A liquor store with bars on the windows and a man sitting on a milk crate outside it, not waiting for anything in particular. Lennox had driven through these blocks before, hundreds of times. His company's distribution hub was 11 minutes south of here. He had approved the route maps himself. He had never once looked at what was between the highway off-ramp and the warehouse entrance. It had not occurred to him that something worth looking at existed in that space. She turned left on Eddy Street. The sedan followed at 2 blocks distance. The streetlights here were spaced farther apart. Some of them did not work. The ones that did cast a yellow that made everything beneath them look temporary. Like the light itself, was not planning to stay. She stopped in front of a building on the corner of Eddy and Laguna. 5 stories, brown stucco exterior with water stains running from the roofline to the 2nd floor. A front entrance with a security door that had been propped open with a folded piece of cardboard. She did not go in. She stood on the sidewalk for what Lennox estimated was 2 full minutes. She set down the bag she was carrying. She reached up and retied her hair. She bent down and changed her shoes. The ones she had been wearing went into the bag. The ones she put on were cleaner, softer looking. She straightened her jacket, adjusted the collar, wiped something from beneath her left eye with the back of her hand. Then she picked up the bag and stood still for another moment. She rolled her shoulders back. She lifted her chin. She arranged her face into something that was not quite a smile, but was close enough to pass for one if you were not paying careful attention. Lennox was paying careful attention. He had watched people prepare for boardrooms, courtrooms, investor meetings, negotiations worth hundreds of millions of dollars. He had watched people compose themselves before walking into rooms that would determine the rest of their professional lives. He recognized the mechanics of it, the deliberate construction of a version of yourself that the people on the other side of the door needed to believe in. This woman was doing the same thing on a sidewalk in the Tenderloin at 12:15 inches the morning before walking into her own home. She did not want whoever was inside to know she was tired. She did not want them to see what the night had cost her. She was building a face for her children, the way other people build faces for shareholders, and she was doing it under a streetlight that barely worked next to a security door held open by cardboard. She went inside. The door closed behind her. A light came on in a window on the 3rd floor. Lennox sat in the back seat of his sedan. He did not tell the driver to leave. He did not open his phone. He did not reach for the glass of water in the center console. He just sat there, looking up at the third-floor window. The light behind it was warm, the kind of warm that comes from a lamp, not an overhead fixture. The kind of warm that someone had chosen deliberately because it mattered to them what the room felt like when they were in it. He took out his phone. He typed the address into a note. 741 Eddy Street, apartment 3C. He saved it. He put the phone back in his pocket. He told the driver to take him home. On the ride back, the streets reversed themselves. The iron fire escapes gave way to bay windows. The check cashing places gave way to wine bars. The yellow streetlights gave way to ones that actually illuminated the sidewalk evenly, as if even the infrastructure had decided certain neighborhoods deserved to be seen more clearly than others. Lennox did not notice the transition. He was thinking about the 2 minutes on the sidewalk, about what kind of exhaustion requires that much preparation to hide, about the distance between the marble reception desk where she had placed the envelope and the cardboard wedged in her front door. He had the address. He did not yet know what he was going to do with it. Denise Lorraine Carter had woken up at 5:40 that morning. Her body did not need an alarm. It had not needed one in 3 years. The shift ended at 6. She was home by 6:25. She slept from 6:30 to 5:40 the next evening if the children did not wake before that. They almost always woke before that. She had not slept more than 5 hours on any night in 3 years. She had stopped counting. Zuri was already at the kitchen table when Denise came out of the bedroom, 9 years old, homework spread out in front of her. A bowl of cereal she had poured herself carefully without spilling. The milk was on the counter beside her because she could not reach the refrigerator shelf where it belonged, and she had not wanted to wake her mother by dragging a chair across the floor. Denise looked at the cereal. She looked at the homework. She looked at her daughter who had organized her own morning like a woman 3 times her age because the alternative was asking for help from someone who had none left to give. She did not say anything about it. She kissed the top of Zuri's head. She put the milk back in the refrigerator. She started on Micah's breakfast. Micah was 5. He was sitting on the floor of the room he shared with Zuri. Drawing. He was always drawing. Not because he loved it more than other things, although he did love it, because drawing was the language his mouth had not yet figured out how to speak. He had a developmental speech delay. The pediatrician had used those words at his 3-year checkup, and Denise had carried them in her chest ever since like a stone she could not put down and could not swallow. Speech therapy was what he needed. She knew that. The pediatrician knew that. The school district evaluation team that had assessed him 7 months ago knew that. Everybody knew that. Private speech therapy in San Francisco cost between $150 and $250 per session. 2 sessions per week was the recommended minimum. Denise made $17.85 an hour. Her insurance through the cleaning company covered 12 sessions per year. Micah needed roughly 100. The public program through Medicaid had a wait list. She had been on it for 11 months. The estimated wait when she applied was 8 to 14 months. Nobody had called. So she made her own version. Every Sunday she went to the public library on Larkin Street and checked out books with pictures and simple words. She made flashcards on index cards. She taped a list to the refrigerator every week. Speech words of the week. She sat with Micah every night before her shift and pointed at the words and said them slowly and waited for him to try. He tried. Not every night, not every word, but he tried. When he could not say what he wanted to say, he drew it. He drew a picture of a sun when he was happy, a picture of rain when he was not, a picture of Zuri when he wanted her to come play, a picture of the moon when he wanted his mother to read to him at night, because the book they read together had a moon on the cover, and the moon had become the word he could not say but could show her. Denise looked at Micah on the floor that morning. He held up a drawing, a circle, yellow, crayon pressed hard into the paper, the moon. It meant, "Read to me tonight." She took it from him and put it on the refrigerator next to the others. She did not let him see her face while she did it. She made his breakfast. She packed Zuri's lunch. She checked the bus schedule. She sat down for 4 minutes at the kitchen table while both children were occupied, and she pressed the heels of her hands against her eyes and breathed. Not because she was going to cry, because the weight behind her eyes was physical, and pressing against it was the only thing that made it ease. Then she stood up. She washed her hands. She started the day. She did not know yet that tonight she would find an envelope in a trash can on the 8th floor of the building, where she mopped hallways and wiped conference tables and emptied recycling bins full of documents worth more than her annual salary. She did not know that the envelope would contain $50,000 in cash. The executive lounge on the 8th floor was the last room on Denise's rotation. She cleaned it between 10:30 and 11 p.m. every Thursday. The room had leather chairs, a coffee station with a machine that cost more than her rent, and a trash can made of brushed steel that weighed more than mica. She had been emptying that trash can for 3 years. It usually contained espresso pods, napkins, and the occasional sandwich wrapper from people who earned enough to buy lunch and not finish it. Tonight, it contained a manila envelope. Unsealed, no name on it. She picked it up to throw it in the bag with the rest. It was heavy. She opened it. Cash. $100 bills, stacked neatly. She counted it once. She stopped. She counted it again. $50,000. $50,000 was not a number her life had ever contained. Not as salary, not as savings, not as possibility. She set the envelope on the conference table. She stepped back from it. She looked at it for what she estimated later was 4 minutes. She did not touch it again during those 4 minutes. She just looked at it, the way you look at something that could change everything if you let it. She thought about Micah, about the wait list, about what $50,000 could buy in sessions and specialists and time. She thought about the rent. She thought about Zuri's shoes that were a half size too small, and that Zuri had not mentioned because Zuri did not mention things like that. She thought about the commissary deposit she sent to her brother every month, $40 taken from skipping lunch 3 days a week, and what it would mean to not have to skip anymore. She picked up the envelope. She folded it in half. She put it in the inside pocket of her coat. She finished cleaning the lounge. She moved to the 9th floor. She cleaned 2 bathrooms and a hallway. She went back downstairs. She mopped the lobby. 45 minutes passed. She walked to the reception desk. She took the envelope out of her coat. She placed it on the marble surface. She took a scrap of paper from the notepad beside the desk phone and wrote 7 words, found in executive lounge. Thursday night shift. She placed the note on top of the envelope. She did not sign it. She did not wait. She walked back to the service corridor and clocked out at 11:52 p.m. Her hands were steady. Her coat was lighter. She did not know that the envelope had been placed there deliberately. She did not know whose money it was. She did not know that the man who owned the building had placed 3 identical envelopes in 3 different locations that week. One in the conference room on the 12th floor, one in the break room on the 3rd, one in the executive lounge on the 8th. 2 of the 3 envelopes had disappeared without a word. No note, no report to security, no mention to management, just gone. The 3rd was sitting on the reception desk with 7 handwritten words on top of it. And the woman who had put it there was already on a bus, heading west, thinking about whether Micah would still be awake when she got home and whether the moon drawing was still on the refrigerator where she had left it that morning. Lennox Ashford started with 1 truck. A rented box truck with a transmission that slipped between 2nd and 3rd gear and a passenger door that did not close all the way. He was 22. He drove it himself. Pickups in Oakland, deliveries in San Jose, invoices written by hand on the dashboard at red lights. He slept in the cab for the first 4 months because he could not afford both rent and diesel in the same week. By 30, he had a fleet. By 40, he had a company. Ashford Integrated Logistics, regional freight, last-mile distribution, warehouse management across 11 states. He built it the way a man builds something when the alternative is going back to where he started, and he has decided that going back is not an option. Every system optimized, every cost tracked, every variable accounted for. He sold the company at 44 for a figure that made the financial press use the word empire. He bought it back at 47 for less than he sold it, because the people who purchased it did not understand what he understood, which was that a logistics company is not a set of trucks. It is a set of relationships between people who trust each other to show up on time and do what they said they would do. The buyers broke that trust in 3 years. Lennox rebuilt it in 18 months. He was 58 now. He ran Ashford Integrated from the top floor of a building on Montgomery Street that he also owned. His net worth was a number he had stopped checking, because at a certain point the number stops meaning anything except that the number exists. His wife Opal had died 6 years ago. Pancreatic cancer. Diagnosed in March. Gone by September. 6 months between the first scan and the last breath, and every day of those 6 months, Lennox had sat beside her hospital bed and done the only thing he had never been good at. He waited. Opal had been a nurse before he was wealthy. She was working the night shift at San Francisco General when he came in at 3 a.m. with a dislocated shoulder from loading freight too fast. She set the shoulder. She told him he was going to hurt himself worse if he kept working like that. He told her he did not have a choice. She told him everyone has a choice. They just do not always like the options. She was the only person in his life who had ever made him look down. Not at spreadsheets, not at balance sheets. Down. At the floor someone else was cleaning. At the driver, waiting in the rain. At the woman behind the register, whose name he had never learned despite buying coffee from her every morning for 6 years. Opal saw those people. She had been one of them. And she made him see them too, not through lectures, through proximity. She simply existed beside him in a way that made invisibility impossible. When she died, that stopped. Nobody replaced it. Nobody could. His son Kendrick was 28. He worked in the company. He was competent in the way that people are competent when they have never been required to be more than that. The relationship between them was professional. That was not an accident. It was a decision Lennox had made without realizing he was making it. He had decided that control was safer than closeness, and had applied that decision to every relationship in his life, including the one that should have been exempt. 2 years after Opal's death, Lennox was approached by a business associate named Roland Gaines. Roland ran a charitable foundation, clean water projects in sub-Saharan Africa. He needed an investor. Lennox wrote a check for $12 million. Roland Gaines spent $2 million on water and $10 million on himself. The foundation was a shell. The projects were photographs of wells that other organizations had built. The financial disclosures were fabricated. The entire thing was a performance of goodness designed to extract money from people who wanted to believe they were doing something real. The Federal Trade Commission estimated that Americans lose over $700 million a year to charitable fraud. Lennox had not known that number before he became part of it. He learned it the way most people learn statistics that matter, after it was too late for the statistic to help. He did not recover the money. He recovered something worse, a conviction, a settled belief that had been forming in him since before the fraud, and that the fraud merely confirmed. Everyone performs goodness when they think someone is watching. The only real measure of a person is what they do when they believe no one is. He tested this. 3 envelopes, $10,000 each, placed in 3 locations inside the building on Montgomery Street, where 400 people worked, and no one expected to be observed by the man whose name was on the deed. Conference room on the 12th floor. Break room on the 3rd. Executive lounge on the 8th. 2 of the 3 disappeared. No one reported finding them. No one turned them in. Lennox was not surprised. He had stopped being surprised by that particular outcome a long time ago. The 3rd envelope was different. The 3rd envelope was placed on a reception desk at 1147 p.m. with a handwritten note. 7 words. No name. And Lennox Ashford, who had not been surprised by a person in 6 years, sat in his home office on a Friday morning and read Opal's last letter for the 190th time. She had written it 4 days before she died. Her handwriting was uneven. The pen had shaken, but the words were clear. Asterisk. You will know them by what they do with what they cannot afford to lose. Asterisk. He had read that sentence every morning since the funeral. It had become a ritual, a thing he did because he had promised her he would. But rituals without understanding are just habits. And habits do not change you. They just keep you in place. He read the sentence again. He did not yet understand what it meant, but for the first time in years he wanted to. 72 hours after the envelope appeared on the reception desk, Lennox opened a secure message to the head of human resources. One line, who was on the night cleaning rotation for the 8th floor executive lounge last Thursday. The reply came in 14 minutes. Denise Carter, employee, ID 4471, night shift custodial team, 3 years on staff. Lennox did not open her full personnel file. Not yet. He opened the summary. 1 page, hire date, shift schedule, emergency contact listed as a neighbor, not a spouse, not a parent, a neighbor. He scrolled to the performance section. 3 years of quarterly reviews. Every box checked satisfactory or above. No disciplinary actions. No incident reports. No formal complaints. No requests for schedule change. No requests for pay advance. No sick days taken despite being entitled to 6 per year under the company's custodial contract. At the bottom of the most recent review, the night shift supervisor had written a note. 4 sentences. Reliable. Never late. Never complains. Never asks for anything. Lennox read the note twice. The first 3 sentences were the kind of thing managers wrote about good employees. The 4th sentence was different. Never asks for anything. He sat with that sentence for a moment. It did not describe a person who had no needs. It described a person who had decided that having needs was not something she could afford to do out loud. He picked up his phone and called his personal assistant, not the company assistant, the one who handled matters that did not go through official channels. I need background on an employee, discreet, not through HR. Her name is Denise Carter. The report came back the next morning. 1 page. Single. 2 children. A daughter aged 9. A son aged 5. The son had a documented developmental speech delay. He had been on a Medicaid waitlist for speech-language therapy for 11 months. In California, the average wait for Medicaid-funded speech therapy ranged from 6 to 18 months depending on the county. San Francisco County was on the longer end. The boy had not yet been seen. The family lived in a Section 8 subsidized apartment on Eddy Street. Section 8 vouchers in San Francisco had a wait list that ran between 2 and 7 years. Many landlords in the city refused to accept them. The ones who did often managed properties with deferred maintenance, broken elevators, and heating systems that worked intermittently. The apartment on Eddy Street was one of those. Denise Carter earned $17.85 per hour. She worked 5 nights a week. She had no second job listed, though the assistant noted that her transit card showed activity consistent with weekend errands that covered a significantly wider area than someone without additional obligations would typically travel. She had not applied for any of the company's employee assistance programs. She had not used the child care reimbursement benefit that was available to all full-time staff. She may not have known it existed. Most hourly employees did not. Lennox sat at his desk, the file open in front of him. 1 page. It was not a complicated document. Single mother, 2 children, one in need of medical care that the system had placed on hold. An apartment held together by a voucher that took years to receive and that could be revoked for reasons as small as a missed recertification appointment. A salary that covered the basics, if you defined basics as the bare minimum required to keep a household from falling below the line, where falling meant not being able to get back up. He looked at the file. This was the woman who found $50,000 in a trash can and returned it with a handwritten note. He put the file down. He picked up his phone. He did not call HR. He did not call his lawyer. He called his driver. The sedan pulled up to the corner of Eddy and Laguna at 7:15 p.m. Lennox told the driver to park across the street. Engine off, lights off. The driver did not ask why. 9 years. The building looked worse in daylight than it had at midnight. The stucco was cracked along the 2nd floor. 2 windows on the 4th floor were covered with plastic sheeting instead of glass. The front entrance still had the same security door with the same piece of cardboard propping it open. Nobody had fixed it. Nobody was going to. Lennox sat in the back seat and watched. At 7:40, a bus stopped at the corner. Denise stepped off. She was carrying 2 bags, one in each hand. The bag in her left hand was heavier, groceries. The bag in her right hand was lighter, the shape of it rectangular, books. He could see the edge of a library sticker on the bag. She walked to the building entrance. Before she reached the door, it opened from inside. A girl came out, 9 years old. She took the heavier bag from her mother's hand without being asked. She turned and went back inside. The motion was practiced. This was a system they had built together. Not discussed, just built. Through repetition, through necessity, through the understanding that this was how things worked in their household, and that asking why was a luxury neither of them had time for. Denise did not follow her daughter inside immediately. She stood at the entrance. A boy appeared behind the glass door, smaller, 5 years old. He did not speak. He held up a piece of paper, a drawing, pressed flat against the glass so she could see it from outside. Denise looked at the drawing. She smiled. Not a big smile. A careful one. The kind of smile that costs something to produce at the end of a day like the one she had just finished. She opened the door and took the drawing from his hands. She held it like it weighed something. Then she went inside. Lennox watched from the car. The 3rd-floor window lit up. The same warm light from the lamp he had seen before. Through the window he could see the kitchen. Denise sat down at a small table. She opened one of the library books. The boy climbed onto the chair next to her. The girl sat on the other side with a notebook open in front of her. Homework. Denise began reading to the boy. Slowly, pointing at the pages. He could see her mouth forming the words with deliberate care. The boy watched her lips. He watched the page. He watched her lips again. On the refrigerator behind them, Lennox could make out a piece of paper taped to the door. He could not read the words from this distance, but the format was clear. A list, handwritten. Below it, a row of small drawings taped with strips of what looked like masking tape. The boy's drawings, lined up neatly. Each one given a place, given permanence. She was teaching him herself. With library books and index cards and a list on a refrigerator, and the patience of someone who did not have the money to pay for the help her son needed, and had decided that not having the money did not mean not doing the work, Denise stopped reading. The boy looked at her. He opened his mouth. A sound came out. Not a word exactly, something between an attempt and a breath. Denise did not correct him. She did not prompt him. She did not look away. She waited. He tried again. His mouth moved differently this time. His lips came together and then apart in a shape that was closer to something recognizable. Moon. The word was quiet, imperfect, but it was there. Denise did not react. She did not clap. She did not praise him. She turned the page of the book to a picture of the moon and kept reading as if nothing extraordinary had happened. As if the word had always been there and he had simply found it at the right time. Lennox sat in the back seat of his car on Eddy Street. The engine was off. The windows were up. The street was getting dark. He had not moved in several minutes. He had not reached for his phone. He had not checked the time. He had not thought about the office, the company, the quarterly projections, the board meeting next Tuesday, or the 11 emails his assistant had flagged as urgent before close of business. He was watching a woman read to her son by lamplight through a 3rd-floor window, in a building he would not have entered for any reason he could have named that morning. He had not sat this still since the night Opal died. Denise Lorraine Carter was born in Bayview Hunters Point, a neighborhood in the southeast corner of San Francisco, where the houses were smaller, the streets were louder, and the distance to the rest of the city was measured not in miles, but in what people on the other side of that distance chose to see and chose not to. Her father was Reginald Carter, a plumber. He worked 6 days a week for a company that sent him to houses in neighborhoods he could not afford to live in, where he fixed pipes under kitchen sinks that cost more than his truck, and drove home at night to a house that was small, paid for, and his. Her mother was Clarice Carter. She worked prep at a restaurant in the Mission, chopping, washing, portioning. She came home smelling like onions and bleach. She kissed both children with hands that were always a little damp from the last wash, and she never once apologized for it. They raised Denise and her brother Terrell in a 2-bedroom house on Newcomb Avenue. It was not a remarkable house. It was not a house that announced anything to anyone. But every surface in it was clean. Every dish was washed before bedtime. Every bill was paid on time. And every rule that mattered was spoken out loud and repeated until it became something you did not think about anymore. It just lived in you. Reginald had one rule he said more often than the others. He said it at dinner. He said it in the truck on the way to church. He said it standing in the checkout line at the Safeway on 3rd Street when Denise was 8 years old and she found a $20 bill on the floor between the cereal aisle and the frozen section, and she picked it up and looked at him with the face of a child who has just discovered that the universe sometimes puts money on the ground for no reason. If it is not yours, it is not yours. Does not matter how much you need it. Does not matter if nobody is looking. He walked her to the service desk. She handed the 20 to the manager. The manager looked at Reginald like he was wasting everyone's time. Reginald did not care what the manager's face did. He cared what his daughter's hands did, and her hands gave it back. Reginald died when Denise was 19. A stroke on a job site in Daly City. He was under a sink when it happened. The homeowner found him. Denise was in her 2nd semester at City College of San Francisco. She dropped out that week, not because she wanted to, because the math changed. When your father dies on a Tuesday and your mother cannot cover rent alone by Friday, the math does not wait for you to grieve. Clarice held on for 2 more years. Kidney failure. Slow, methodical. The kind of dying that lets you watch someone become less of themselves one system at a time, while the medical bills arrive with the regularity of something that has been automated and does not know how to stop. Denise paid what she could. Clarice died on a Wednesday in April. Denise was 20. Her brother Terrell was 18 when their mother passed. He had been a good kid. Not a perfect kid. A good one. But good is a narrow road when the people who kept you on it are gone, and the people who are still around are walking a different direction. He fell in with a group of men who offered the 2 things grief makes you desperate for: structure and belonging. He was arrested at 21, sentenced to 8 years in a state facility 240 miles from San Francisco. Denise visited when she could. Twice a year. The drive was 4 hours each way. She took the bus because she did not own a car. The bus took 6 hours. She left at 3 a.m. to arrive by 9. Visiting hours ended at 3 p.m. She was home by midnight. Phone calls from the facility cost $1 a minute. Some months, Terrell called twice a week. Some months, he did not call at all. The months he did not call were worse. Denise sent money to his commissary account every month, $40. Enough for soap and ramen and stamps. She got the $40 by not eating lunch on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, every week. For 14 months, she had stopped noticing the hunger. It had become background. A condition of her life, the way the commute was a condition, and the night shift was a condition, and the fact that her son could not yet say her name was a condition. She did not complain about Terrell. She did not speak about him with bitterness. She did not tell people her brother was in prison unless they asked directly, and most people did not ask directly because most people did not ask about her life at all. She had Zuri at 23. The father left before the birth. She had Micah at 29. A different man. He stayed for 2 years. He left when the pediatrician used the words developmental speech delay and handed Denise a referral list, and the man sitting next to her looked at that list and saw not a child who needed help, but a future that would cost more than he had planned to spend. He was gone within the month. Denise did not look for him. She did not file for child support. She calculated the legal fees, estimated the likelihood of collection given his employment history, subtracted the cost in time and energy, and the particular kind of hope that is required to pursue someone who has already decided you are not worth staying for, and concluded that the math did not work. She went to work. She came home. She fed her children. She read to her son. She taped his drawings to the refrigerator. She skipped lunch 3 days a week and sent $40 south to a facility where her brother was learning to survive inside a system that had no interest in teaching him how to survive outside of it. She did all of this on 5 hours of sleep and $17.85 an hour, and she did not ask anyone for help. Not because she did not need it, because she had learned through the accumulation of 15 years of evidence that asking was a transaction that cost more than it returned. You ask, and people look at you differently. You ask, and the system makes a note. You ask, and someone with a clipboard decides you are a risk factor instead of a person. You ask, and the help comes with conditions that feel less like support and more like surveillance. So she did not ask. She carried it, the way her father carried pipes to houses he would never own, the way her mother carried the smell of someone else's kitchen home every night, the way her brother carried time in a place that measured his life in days remaining. She carried it because it was hers, and because putting it down was not one of the options, and because the only alternative to carrying it was letting it fall on her children, and that was never going to happen. Lennox Ashford knocked on the door of apartment 3C on a Saturday morning at 9:15. He did not send an assistant. He did not call ahead. He did not arrange a meeting through HR or schedule a time through the building management office. He drove to Eddy Street, walked through the front entrance with the cardboard still wedged in the security door, climbed 3 flights of stairs that smelled like cooking oil and laundry detergent, and knocked. Denise opened the door. She was wearing a gray sweatshirt and jeans. Her hair was pulled back. She looked at him the way a person looks at something that has appeared in the wrong place. "My name is Lennox Ashford. I own the building you work in. I know who you are. You returned an envelope last Thursday. It was not mine." He paused. She did not fill the silence. She held the door at an angle that allowed her to see him fully without opening it wide enough for him to see inside. "I know. That is why I am here." She looked at him for a moment. Then she opened the door the rest of the way. Not because she trusted him, because she had decided that whatever this was, it was better to face it standing up than to wonder about it later. The apartment was small, 2 bedrooms, a kitchen that doubled as a dining room, a living room that doubled as a play area. On the floor near the window, Micah sat with a sheet of paper and a box of crayons. He did not look up. He was drawing. Zuri was at the kitchen table reading a book that was too advanced for most 9-year-olds and exactly right for a child who had been raising herself since she was 6. Lennox sat at the kitchen table because Denise gestured toward the chair, and he understood that sitting was not optional. Standing in her home while she sat would have made this something it was not. He told her what he had come to say. He did not make it long. He did not make it emotional. He spoke in the language he knew best. Structure. There was a position in his company. Operations coordinator. Entry-level management. The salary was 3 times what she currently earned. The benefits package included full medical coverage, dental vision, and a mental health and developmental services rider that covered speech-language therapy for dependents up to age 18, 2 sessions per week. No wait list. No cap. Denise did not move. He was not finished. The position required a GED and completion of a 6-month operations management certificate. The company would pay for both. Tuition, materials, exam fees, all of it. His company had an employee development fund that had been written into the operating budget for 4 years. The fund covered GED completion trade certifications and associate degree programs for any full-time employee. The enrollment rate across the entire company was 1.3%. Not because people did not want it, because nobody told them it existed. The information was buried in a benefits handbook that most hourly employees never received, and that the ones who did receive it never read because it was 94 pages long and written in a font size that suggested the company did not actually want anyone to use it. He said this without apology. He said it the way a man says something he has only recently realized is a problem and has not yet decided how much of it is his fault. Denise looked at him. "I do not take things I have not earned. This is not a gift. This is an investment. There is a difference." She did not answer right away. She looked down at the floor where Micah was drawing. The crayon in his hand was yellow. He was pressing it into the paper with the concentration of someone whose hands could say what his mouth had not yet learned to. The drawing was a circle. Large. Bright. She knew what it meant. He wanted the moon book tonight. She looked at the drawing. She looked at Lennox. She did not say yes. "I need to think about it." Lennox nodded. He stood up. He did not press. He did not leave a card. He did not say, "Take your time or let me know." He walked to the door. He stopped. "The program is already there," he said. "It has been there for 4 years. I am not building something new for you. I am telling you about something that should have been made visible a long time ago. What you do with it is yours to decide." He left. The door closed behind him. Denise stood in her kitchen. Micah was still drawing. Zuri had stopped reading and was looking at her mother with the expression of a child who understands more than she has been told and is waiting to see whether she will be told the rest. Denise did not say anything. She picked up Micah's drawing from the floor. She put it on the refrigerator next to the others, next to the speech words of the week, next to the row of moons and suns and small figures that her son had drawn, because drawing was the language he had, and he used it to say the things that mattered. She stood in front of the refrigerator for a long time. She was not reading the words. She was looking at the whole of it, everything her life had produced and everything it had not. Taped to a door with masking tape, in an apartment that smelled like coffee and crayons and the particular quiet that exists in a home where someone has been holding everything together alone for so long that the holding has become invisible, even to herself. Denise did not sleep that night. Not because of the shift. She was off on Saturdays. She did not sleep because the thing Lennox had placed in front of her was not money. It was not charity. It was possibility. And she had learned a long time ago that hope was a luxury item. And luxury items in her experience were the first things repossessed. She had been here before. Not this exactly, but the shape of it. Someone offers something. You reach for it. The thing moves. You are left with your hand out, and nothing in it, and the memory of what it felt like to believe it was real. She had stopped reaching a long time ago. Reaching was a risk she had removed from her operating system, the way you remove a program that crashes too often. You do not miss it. You just stop trying to open it. The problem was not the job. The problem was the logistics of accepting it. The position was daytime, 8 to 5. The GED classes were 2 evenings a week, 6 to 9. She currently worked the night shift because the night shift was the only shift that allowed her to be home during the day when Micah was not in school and Zuri needed supervision after 3 p.m. If she switched to days, someone needed to be with the children from 3 p.m. until she got home at 5:30. If she went to class 2 evenings a week, someone needed to be with them from 5:30 until 9:30. Childcare in San Francisco averaged $15 to $20 an hour for a licensed provider. She could not afford that on her current salary. She could not afford it on the new salary either, not immediately, not before the first paycheck cleared, and not with the deposit on the class materials due in the first week. She sat at the kitchen table on Saturday night, doing the math on the back of a grocery receipt. The numbers did not work. They almost worked. But almost was not a number you could deposit. Zuri found the note on Sunday morning. It was taped to the refrigerator, right next to the speech words of the week, right next to the row of moons. 5 words in a 9-year-old's handwriting written in pencil on a torn piece of notebook paper. I can watch Micah. I already do. Denise was standing in the kitchen when she saw it. She read it twice. She did not move for what she estimated later was about 3 minutes. She took the note down from the refrigerator. She folded it once. She put it in her wallet, in the same pocket where she kept the last $20 bill Clarice had ever given her. Her mother had pressed it into her hand the week before she died and said, "Buy yourself something that is not for anyone else." Denise had never spent it. She did not know what to buy with it that would be worth more than the fact that her mother had given it to her. The note went in with the 2 pieces of paper. One from a woman who had loved her and left. One from a child who loved her and stayed. On Sunday afternoon, there was a knock on the door. Loretta Mae Simmons, apartment 3D, 67 years old, retired postal worker. She had lived across the hall from Denise for 3 years. They exchanged greetings in the hallway. They held the elevator for each other. Loretta brought over a plate of food on Thanksgiving because she had cooked too much and did not like eating alone, though both of them understood that the reason was not the food and was not the portion size. Loretta stood in the doorway. She was not a woman who wasted words. "I heard you talking to yourself last night. Through the wall. You were doing math out loud." Denise said nothing. "I have been watching you carry this by yourself for 3 years from across the hall. It is enough. Bring those babies to my door on your way out. I will be there when you leave, and I will be there when you get back. Do not offer me money. I am not asking for money. I am asking you to let somebody help you before you break something that does not heal." Denise looked at her. Loretta looked back. Neither of them moved. In Black communities across America, this was not unusual. This was the system, not the one with case files and eligibility requirements and 94-page handbooks, the other one. The one built on proximity and observation and the understanding that the woman across the hall was not a stranger. She was infrastructure. She was the reason children got fed and dressed and supervised while their mothers worked jobs that did not pay enough to afford the systems that were supposed to provide exactly this. Loretta did not wait for an answer. She patted the doorframe once. She turned around. She went back to 3D. Denise closed the door. She sat down at the kitchen table. She opened her wallet. She looked at the 20. She looked at the note. She looked at the speech words of the week on the refrigerator and the moon drawings and the life she had assembled from nothing with nothing, and she understood that the nothing had never been nothing. It had been Zuri making her own cereal without waking her. It had been Loretta bringing plates of food for reasons neither of them named. It had been Micah drawing pictures of what he could not say and trusting her to understand them. She picked up her phone. She dialed the number on the card Lennox had not left. She had memorized it from the company directory posted on the custodial break room wall. She had memorized it the night she started working there. Not because she thought she would need it, because she memorized everything. It was how she survived. The phone rang twice. "This is Denise Carter. I will take the position." The first month was the hardest month Denise had experienced since the year her mother died. The position started on a Monday. She arrived at 7:45, 15 minutes early. She sat at a desk she had cleaned the underside of for 3 years and opened a computer that required a login she did not yet have. An IT technician set it up for her in 10 minutes and left without explaining how the email system worked. She figured it out by 11 a.m. She did not ask anyone for help. The second week, she sat in her first operations meeting. 14 people around a conference table she had wiped down every Thursday night for 156 consecutive weeks. She did not speak. She took notes on a legal pad. She listened. She went home that night and read until 1 a.m. By the end of the second month, she could navigate the logistics management software, the inventory tracking system, and the internal communications platform. She had taught herself Excel from a library book and a series of free tutorials she watched on her phone during lunch breaks. She ate lunch now. Every day, sitting down, at a table, in a break room where she used to empty the recycling bins. In March, Micah started speech therapy, real sessions, twice a week, with a speech-language pathologist named Dr. Yvonne Hadley, who had been doing this work for 22 years and who sat with Micah on his first session and watched him draw a moon before she asked him to say anything at all. In the second session, Dr. Yvonne asked Denise about the flashcards, about the speech words of the week, about the library books and the refrigerator and the system Denise had built from nothing, because the real system had put her son on a list and left him there. "Doctor," Yvonne looked at her for a moment, "you have been doing my job with a library card and tape on a refrigerator." Denise did not respond to that. There was nothing to respond to. She had done what was available. What was available was a library and tape. So that is what she used. In April, Denise found the routing error. It was in the warehouse distribution system. A misalignment between the loading dock schedule and the driver dispatch sequence that caused a 40-minute gap every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon. Nobody in operations had noticed it. Not the logistics managers, not the analysts, not the consultants the company had hired twice in the past 18 months to optimize exactly this process. Denise noticed it because she had mopped the warehouse floor at 11 p.m. on Tuesdays and Thursdays for 3 years. She had watched the trucks sit idle. She had seen the drivers waiting. She had counted the minutes because she counted everything. She counted the same way her father counted pipes, and her mother counted onions, and her brother counted the days. It was a family habit. It was how they made the math work. She brought the error to her supervisor. The supervisor brought it to the operations director. The operations director brought it to a meeting. Denise was asked to present the solution. She stood at the front of a conference room with a whiteboard marker in her hand and explained the problem in 4 minutes. She had rehearsed it 11 times the night before in her kitchen, while Loretta watched the children. Lennox was in that meeting. He sat in the back row. He did not speak. After the meeting, he sent one message to his assistant. She is better than half the people in that room, and she knows it. That is the difference. In May, Micah said a full sentence. His therapist recorded it. Denise was sitting in the session observation room on the other side of the glass when it happened. She put her hand over her mouth. She did not make a sound. Doctor. Yvonne looked through the glass at her. Neither of them said anything. Neither of them needed to. In June, Denise completed the Operations Management Certificate. She passed the exam on the first attempt. She scored in the top 3% of her cohort. She did not tell anyone the score. Zuri found the results letter in the kitchen and taped it to the refrigerator without asking. Next to the moons. Next to the words. Next to everything else that mattered in that apartment. The first full sentence Micah ever spoke was not the one anyone expected. 8 months after the envelope, the call came on a Tuesday afternoon. Lennox was in his office on the 30th floor. The head of accounts receivable was on the line. There was a discrepancy. The $50,000 envelope that Denise had returned did not match any of Lennox's disbursements. He had placed 3 envelopes, each containing $10,000. Conference room on 12. Break room on 3. Executive lounge on 8. All 3 were drawn from the same discretionary account. All 3 were documented. The $10,000 envelope for the executive lounge was recovered from the reception desk. The note matched, the date matched, but the amount did not. The envelope Denise returned contained $50,000, 5 times the amount Lennox had placed. He asked accounts receivable to trace it. The answer came back in 2 hours. The $50,000 was a cash withdrawal from a personal discretionary fund belonging to Kendrick Ashford, Lennox's son. Kendrick had used the executive lounge for a private meeting on the Wednesday before the Thursday night. Denise found the envelope. He had brought the cash for a transaction that he later completed by wire transfer. He left the envelope on the table. He forgot it. He forgot $50,000 on a table because $50,000 was not a number that required his attention. It was not a number that his life noticed the absence of. It was loose change in a room he would not remember entering by the following week. The envelope that Denise found was not the test. It was not the $10,000 Lennox had placed to measure human behavior from the mezzanine of a building he owned. It was real money left by a man who did not miss it, found by a woman who could not afford to keep it, and returned by hands that had been shaking when they set it down on the marble, because those hands knew exactly what $50,000 could have bought and chose to let it go anyway. She had not passed a test. She had made a decision in the middle of her actual life, with her actual son on a wait list, and her actual rent due, and her actual brother 240 miles away, in a facility that charged $1 a minute for the sound of a familiar voice. She made the decision she made, not because someone was watching, because no one was. Lennox sat at his desk, the file open, the accounting trace on the screen, Opal's letter in the drawer beside him. Asterisk. You will know them by what they do with what they cannot afford to lose. Asterisk. For 6 years that sentence had been a ritual. Words he read every morning because he had promised a dying woman he would. He had kept the promise. He had not kept the meaning. The meaning had slipped away from him the way meaning does when you repeat something so often it becomes sound without weight. It had weight now. He picked up his phone. He called Kendrick. Your money was returned. The envelope you left in the executive lounge. Kendrick paused. I did not know I left it. I know you did not. It was returned by the woman who cleans the floor you walk on. She earns in a month what you left on a table and forgot. The line was quiet. Think about that. He hung up. Kendrick Ashford arrived at his father's office at 6 p.m. on a Wednesday. He had not been asked to come. He had been told to think about something, and he had spent 3 days thinking about it, and the thinking had not stopped, and so he came. He was 28 years old. He had grown up in the house on Pacific Heights after the money had already arrived. He had attended private school. He had attended a university that cost more per year than Denise Carter earned in 3. He had entered his father's company at 23 with a title and an office and an understanding that both had been provided not earned. He knew this. He did not talk about it. He was not a cruel person. He was not unkind. He held doors open. He said please and thank you in restaurants. He donated to causes his assistants selected from a curated list every December. He was by every visible measure a decent man. But decency and awareness are not the same thing. You can be decent and still not see the people standing 3 feet from you. You can be decent and walk across a floor someone else cleaned at 4 a.m. and never once wonder whose hands did the work or what those hands went home to afterward. Kendrick sat down across from his father. The office was quiet. The city was visible through the glass behind Lennox's desk, 30 floors up, far enough from the street to forget the street existed. Why does it matter to you that she returned it? Lennox did not answer immediately. He looked at his son the way he had been looking at things recently, not through the lens of assessment, through something older. Something Opal had left in him that he had only just found again, because your mother would have returned it. The room was quiet. Kendrick looked at the desk, at his hands, at the window behind his father. Mom was not poor. No. But she was a nurse making $42,000 a year when I met her, and she would have returned it. Poverty had nothing to do with it. Kendrick did not respond. He sat with the words, he sat with the number, $42,000, his mother's salary before everything changed. Before the trucks became a fleet, and the fleet became a company, and the company became a name that people recognized in rooms, she never entered because she was working a 12-hour shift at a hospital where the parking garage smelled like exhaust, and the break room coffee maker had been broken. Since 2003, he thought about the executive lounge. He had been in that room hundreds of times. He had left the envelope on the table after a meeting and walked out and not thought about it again. $50,000. Left on a surface and forgotten the way you forget a pen or a water bottle or a receipt you no longer need. The lounge was cleaned every night by a rotation of 4 people. He did not know any of their names. He had never learned them. Not because he had chosen not to, because it had never occurred to him that there were names to learn. The people who cleaned were part of the building the way the elevator was part of the building. Present, functional, invisible. The Montgomery Street building employed approximately 200 support staff, security guards, custodians, maintenance workers, mailroom operators, cafeteria staff, loading dock crew. 200 people who arrived before the office workers and left after them, and whose labor made every meeting, every presentation, every quarterly review, every corner office with a city view possible. Kendrick had never said thank you to any of them, not once, not in 5 years. He was not proud of this. He was not ashamed of it yet either. He was in the space between, which is the space where most people live when they first realize that the world they occupied was smaller than the one that actually existed. He looked at his father. What is the woman's name? Denise Carter. Kendrick took out his phone. He opened the Notes app. He typed the name. 2 words. 8 letters and 6 letters. He saved it. He put the phone back in his pocket. It was a small thing, writing down a name. It did not change anything about the structures that had made her invisible to him. It did not undo the distance between the 32nd floor and the basement utility room. It did not make him a different person. But it was the first name he had written down that belonged to someone his life had been built on top of without him knowing. And writing it down meant he could no longer say he did not know it. He sat with his father for another 10 minutes. Neither of them spoke. It was the longest they had been in the same room without discussing the company in years. 1 year later, Denise Carter moved into a 2-bedroom apartment on Fulton Street. She paid the rent herself. Not from charity, not from a program, not from an envelope left on a table, from a salary she had earned over 12 months of work that nobody had given her and nobody could take away. The apartment was on the 2nd floor. It had windows that faced west. In the late afternoon, the light came through those windows at an angle that made the kitchen warm without turning on a lamp. Denise noticed this the first time she walked through the empty rooms with the landlord. She did not mention it, but it was the reason she chose this apartment over the other one that was $80 cheaper. The light mattered. She could not explain exactly why. It just did. Zuri had her own room for the first time. She stood in the doorway of it on moving day and did not go in right away. She looked at the space. The walls were white. The floor was clean. The window was open. She stood there for a moment with the expression of a child who has been given something she did not ask for and does not yet know how to hold. Then she went in. She put her backpack on the floor. She sat on the bed that Denise had bought from a second-hand store on Divisadero for $75 and had cleaned with vinegar and a cloth until it smelled like nothing but clean. Zuri lay down. She looked at the ceiling. She closed her eyes. She was asleep in 4 minutes. She was 10 years old, and she had not had a room to herself since she was born. She slept for 2 hours without moving. Micah was 6 now. He had been in speech therapy for 10 months, twice a week. Dr. Yvonne had documented his progress in a file that was now 44 pages long. He could say 85 words consistently. He could form short sentences. He could ask for things. He could name the people in his life. He could say Zuri. He could say Loretta. He could say Mom. Loretta came to the new apartment that first evening. She brought a dish she said she had made too much of. She had been making too much of things for the past year, enough for 4, not because she miscounted, because 4 was the number she cooked for now. Herself, Denise, Zuri, Micah. She did not live with them. She did not need to. She came every evening because that is what family does, and she had decided a long time ago that family was a thing you built, not a thing you were assigned. Denise unpacked the last box in the kitchen. She had labeled it with a single word: keep. Inside the box were 3 things: a $20 bill in a small envelope, her mother's last gift. Buy yourself something that is not for anyone else. She had never spent it. She would not spend it now. A torn piece of notebook paper in a child's handwriting. I can watch Micah. I already do. A scrap from a reception desk notepad, found in executive lounge. Thursday night shift. She taped all 3 to the new refrigerator. Below them she taped the current speech words of the week. Below that the row of drawings, the moons, the suns. The small figures Micah had drawn across 2 years of learning to say what his hands had always known. The refrigerator in the old apartment had been beige and dented, and the freezer door had not closed properly since 2021. This one was white and clean, and the door sealed shut with a sound that meant things stayed cold and stayed fresh and stayed where you put them. But the things taped to it were the same, carried from one life to the next, not because they were valuable in any way that could be measured, because they were proof that she had been here, that she had carried it, that it had not broken her. Micah came into the kitchen. He was holding a piece of paper. He looked up at the refrigerator, at the drawings, at the words, at the things his mother had taped to every refrigerator he had ever known, because she had decided that this surface, more than any other surface in any home they had lived in, was where the things that mattered went. He looked at his mother. Mom, I drew you the moon. Denise looked at the paper in his hands. A large yellow circle, crayon pressed hard. Below the circle, two figures, one tall, one small, standing next to each other, not holding hands, just close. Close enough that you could tell they belonged together without anyone having to say it. She took the drawing. She looked at it for a long time. She did not speak. She taped it to the refrigerator. Above the words, above the notes, above everything else. In the place where the most important thing goes. She pressed the tape down with her thumb. She smoothed the edges. She stepped back. Micah was already walking away. Back to his room. Back to his crayons. He had said what he needed to say. He did not need her to say anything back. The kitchen was quiet. The light through the west-facing windows was golden and warm and falling across the refrigerator at the angle Denise had noticed the first day and chosen this apartment for. The drawing caught the light. The yellow circle glowed. She stood in her kitchen, in her apartment, in a life she had paid for with every night shift and every skipped lunch, and every morning she woke up at 5:40 and did not stop moving until the children were asleep and the kitchen was clean and the words were taped to the prosts. Refrigerator and the drawings were in their place. She stood in that life and let it hold her for a moment. She did not cry. She did not need to. The thing she felt was not grief. It was not relief. It was the sound a house makes when everyone is inside it and nothing is wrong with anything. Lennox Ashford sat in his office at 7:14 p.m. on a Thursday. The building was quiet. Most of the staff had gone home. The cleaning crew had started their rotation on the lower floors. He could hear the faint hum of a vacuum somewhere below him. He had never noticed that sound before. He noticed it now. He opened the drawer beside his desk. Opal's letter was inside. He had read it 5 times. He unfolded it. The paper was soft from handling. The crease down the center had gone white from being opened and closed across 7 years of mornings. Her handwriting was uneven. The pen had shaken, but the words were clear. Asterisk. You will know them by what they do with what they cannot afford to lose. Asterisk. He read it. He set it on the desk. He opened a pen. For 7 years he had read this sentence and not written back, not because he had nothing to say, because he had not yet earned the right to add his words to hers. He had read her sentence the way you read scripture, with reverence, without response, as if responding would diminish it. Tonight he wrote below her words, in his handwriting, which was steady and precise and nothing like hers. I found her. She was cleaning the floor I walked on and I almost did not look down. He looked at the sentence. He did not cross it out. He did not revise it. He folded the letter along the same crease and placed it back in the drawer and closed the drawer and sat still for a moment. Then he stood up. He put on his coat. He walked to the door of his office. He did not press the elevator button. He opened the stairwell door. 30 floors. He walked every one of them, not because he needed the exercise, because he had spent 20 years moving through this building without touching it, without hearing the echo of his own footsteps in the concrete between floors, without passing through the spaces that connected one level to the next. He had always arrived. He had never traveled. He reached the ground floor. He pushed open the stairwell door. The lobby was lit. The marble floor was clean, freshly cleaned. He could smell the faint trace of the solution that someone had used to mop it 20 minutes ago. He walked to the security desk. A man sat behind it. Nameplate on the left side of his chest. Darnell. Lennox stopped. Good evening, Darnell. The security guard looked up. He had worked in this building for 6 years. The man standing in front of him had walked past this desk roughly 1500 times. This was the first time he had ever been addressed by name. Good evening, Mr. Ashford. Lennox nodded once. He walked through the glass doors. The street was dark. The air was cold. His driver was parked at the curb with the engine running and the rear door unlocked. He walked past the car. He did not gesture to the driver. He did not stop. He turned south on Montgomery Street and walked. He had driven through these streets 1,000 times. Tonight, for the first time, he walked. Denise Carter found $50,000 that was not hers. She returned it on a salary that could not afford a single therapy session for her son. Kendrick Ashford left $50,000 on a table and forgot it was there. The world does not have a word for the distance between those two realities, but it should. The cruelest thing about people like Denise is not what they survive. It is how easily the rest of us learn to look past them. She was in that building for 3 years. She cleaned the floors we walked on. She emptied the trash before we arrived. She worked the hours we slept through. And nobody knew her name until a man watched her give back the one thing that could have changed everything and walked away like it was the only option she had ever considered. Someone in your building cleans the floor you walk on. Someone in your office empties the trash before you arrive. Someone in your life is holding everything together with hands that shake from hunger and discipline and love, and you have never once asked their name. If this story made you see someone you have been looking past, send it to them. Not as an apology, as a beginning. If it made you angry, good. That anger is information. Use it. Subscribe to Lena's Story. See you in the next one.